everyone. My name is Bilhilali Zineb, and today we're going to talk about chapter 2 from John Story's book, Cultural Theory and Popular Culture An Introduction. This chapter focuses on four major ideas about culture. Matthew Arnold's view of culture, leftism, the post war debate about mass culture in America, and finally, how Western thinkers represent the culture of other people. I will explain each idea in a very simple way and show how all of them help us understand the relationship between culture and society. Let me start with Matthew Arnold's. Arnold believed that culture is the best thing that has been thought. Instead, for him, culture is not just entertainment or fun. It is something that helps people improve morally and intellectually. He thought culture has the power to guide people to truth, beauty, and better value. Arnold was worried about the rise of popular culture during industrialization. He left the mass produced entertainment could weaken people's mind because it focuses on pleasure instead of knowledge. According to him, when society follows only popular trends, people stop thinking deeply. They become passive and lose interest in moral and intellectual growth. That's why Arnold believed that we should protect and promote high culture, such as classical literature, philosophy, and the finest arts. He believed these works help us think more clearly and become better individuals. In short, Arnold's message is that culture should lift society up. It should make people wiser, kinder, and more balanced. Without high culture, he believed society could easily fall into confusion and lower standards. Now, moving on to Leftism, which comes from ideas of Lewis. Lewis agreed with Arnold that culture is essential for building a strong society. He believed that great literature, especially the classic, plays a central role in shaping moral and intelligent individuals. Just like Arnold, Lewis was very critical of mass culture. He believed that mass produced entertainment like cheap novels, commercial movies, and flashy magazines lower culture quality. For Lewis, mass culture makes people passive and uncritical. He argued that it is created more for profit than for moral intellectual growth. And Lewis also worried that industrialization changed society in a negative way. He believed that before industrialization, people lived closer together in small, meaningful communities. But in modern times, culture became commercial, artificial, and controlled by big industries. So, Leavism argues that only high qualities, literature, and serious cultural works can protect society from moral decline. Leaves wanted people to return to real, meaningful culture instead of mass produced entertainment. Now we're moving on to mass culture in America, the post war debate. After World War II, mass culture became extremely powerful in America. Television, radio, advertising, and Hollywood movies reached millions of people every day. This created a major debate among thinkers. Was mass culture good or bad for society? The critics of mass culture believed it was manipulative. They argued that media campaigns used entertainment and advertising to control people's opinion and choices. For example, they said TV and advertising encouraged people to care more about buying things than thinking critically. According to these critics, mass culture made people passive and easily influenced. On the other hand, some thinkers believed mass culture was actually democratic. They argued that it made culture available to everyone, not just to the rich or educated. Through radio and television, ordinary people gained access to news, music, and information. So, support saw mass culture as a positive modern development that connected society. So, this debate didn't produce one final answer, but it helped cultural studies. It taught us that mass culture is complex. It can educate people, but it can also manipulate them. It can unite society, but it can also control society. This is why understanding media and advertising is still important today. Moving on to the culture of other people, which is the last part in the chapter. Here we're going to talk about how Western societies have represented the culture of other people, especially non Western cultures. Historically, many Western thinkers believed their own culture was superior. Because of this, they often describe other culture as strange, primitive, or less civilized. These descriptions created stereotypes and were not based on real knowledge. Instead, they were shaped by imagination, fear, or political interests. This is what Edward said later called Orientalism. The way Western writers created an unreal, exotic image of the East that fit Western expectations instead of reality. This way of thinking was deeply connected to colonialism. When Western countries controlled other nations, they used cultural arguments to justify their actions. They claimed they were bringing civilization and progress, but in reality, they were reinforcing power and domination. The main message is that culture is never neutral. How we talk about other cultures can create power, imbalance, and misunderstanding. This section reminds us to question stereotypes and to understand culture through respect, real knowledge, and awareness of history. So, in this chapter, John's story explains four important ways of understanding culture, and he connects them to how society works and how people see each other. He begins with Matthew Arnold, who believed that culture is basically the best that humanity has created, the greatest ideas, the greatest art, and the greatest literature. For Arnold, culture was nothing just entertainment. It was something that helped people grow morally and intellectually. He worried that during industrialization, when popular entertainments became more common, people would become more passive and less interested in serious thinking. So he argued that society needed to protect high culture in order to stay balanced and healthy. Story then moves to Leftism, a way of thinking inspired by Lewis, who agreed with many of Arnold's ideas. He believed that great literature could help shape good, responsible individuals, and he was very critical of mass culture, which he thought was shallow, commercial, and created mainly for profit. He believed that before industrialization, people lived in small, close communities with richer cultural lives, and he felt that modern mass culture weakened these traditions and replaced them with easy pleasure that did not require real thought. after discussing Arnold and Levy's story, explained the huge debate about mass culture in America after World War II. This was a time when television, radio, advertising, and Hollywood movies were everywhere, reaching millions of people every day, and many thinkers began to ask whether mass culture was something positive or negative. Some critics believed that mass culture could manipulate people by encouraging them by things, follow trends, and accept ideas without thinking. They argued that this kind of culture made people passive and easier to control, but others believed the opposite. They argued that mass culture was democratic because it gave ordinary people access to information, music, news, and entertainment that had once been available only to wealthy or highly educated. Story shows that this debate had no final answer, but it influenced the development of cultural studies by showing that mass culture can both educate people and control them at the same time. Finally, the chapter looks at how Western societies have historically represented the cultures of other people, especially non Western societies. For a long time, many Western writers described other culture as strange, primitive, or less civilized, and these descriptions were often based on imagination than real understanding. So Surrey connects this to ideas later explained by Edward said under the term Orientalism, which describes how the West created a false exotic image of the East that served Western interests and supports colonial power. So this representation often made Western culture appear superior and justified domination over other peoples. Surrey's overall message in this chapter is that culture is not neutral, it is deeply connected to power values and the way societies understand themselves and others. Whether we talk about high culture, mass culture, or the representation of other culture, each idea shows that culture always shape how people think, how they behave, and how they relate to the world around them. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thanks for listening. I hope I made the chapter 2 of John Story's book very clear and understandable.